Hello, sparrows. Surprise. I was on a bike ride this morning with the Pippi in my bag, and I cycled past my friend's garden and she's not home. So I have snuck into her garden to sit on her beautiful terrace at the back here, surrounded by bird song, and I thought I'd read Pippi here. Why not? So, are you sitting comfortably? So quiet. Are you in your comfy spot? Luckily, in my pocket, I always carry 2 thimbles, so I can always make thimble tea. So let's make surprise terrace tea. And in this tea, we are going to mix the surprise of forget-me-nots, the smile of dandelions, oh, look at that over there. Let's have the kiss of a cabbage white butterfly. And her cat was here just now. So let's stir our surprise terrace tea up with the swirl of a cat's tail. There we are. We should have some yummy spice in here. How about some ginger, some wild ginger? Here is some tea for you. Cheers. And for me, cheers. Woo! Wild ginger and cat's tail. Who knew it would taste that delicious? That is so good. Just right for telling stories. So are you sitting comfortably? Are you in your comfy spot? That's good. Oh, I thought she was coming home. Be fine. She could sit over there and listen. Let's blow our love and hugs and wishes all around the world, wherever they need to be. I brought also in my backpack my friend Babushka, because she's really doesn't mind if I sit on her like a cushion. So she is my Babushka friend. She's also a really good tea cozy. And she just likes to be with me in my backpack, so I thought I'd bring her out to listen to our story. Is that okay? Okay. This is what happens when you can't see your friends very often. You start talking to tea cozies. There you go. You sit over here, Babushka. Here's some nice thimble tea for you. Oh, look. Actually, she's just the right... Oh, it happens to us all in the end. We just become friends with our tea cozies. There's your tea, Babushka. You're welcome. With your lovely cat who doesn't have a name yet. We need a name. Oh, it's an orange cat. Let's call you Wild Ginger. Oh, there we are. Gosh, what a busy morning. Naming cats, finding our friends, living in our backpacks. And funnily enough, Pippi is about to meet a new friend. Or rather, she's going to teach somebody that by making up tall tales and showing people to have a brain rest in fantasy land, it can help people with anxiety. So, remember that when you're making up wonderful stories and daydreams in your mind and drifting off into another land, you're giving your beautiful mind a rest. So then you can come back and think about other things after your rest. Okay, here we go. One afternoon, Pippi was wandering around in her garden, waiting for Tommy and Annika to come over. But no Tommy and no Annika. So she decided to go to their house to see what they were doing. And when she got to their garden, she discovered that they were there in their own garden, but not alone. In their garden sat Mrs. Settergren, that's their mother, and there was a very nice old lady who had come to visit. The two ladies were sitting under a tree drinking coffee, and Annika and Tommy were having fruit juice. When they saw Pippi, they came running over to see her. "Oh, Pippi," said Tommy, "Aunt Laura came over, and that's why we haven't come over to see you." And Pippi was peeking through a hole in the hedge, and she said, "Well, Aunt Laura, she looks very nice. I think I must come and talk to her. You know, Tommy and Annika, I'm very fond of old ladies." Well, Annika looked a bit worried, and she said, "Sometimes, Pippi, Aunt Laura's a little bit grumpy. Are you sure that you know how to talk to grumpy people?" And Pippi said, "Do I know how to talk to grumpy people? They just need to be cheered up," said Pippi, "and that's exactly what I'm going to do." She walked across the lawn to where the ladies were sitting under the tree. And first she curtsied to Mrs. Settergren, and then she looked at Aunt Laura and clapped her hands. "Hello, Aunt Laura," she said. "Just look more beautiful than ever. Please may I have a little fruit juice so my throat won't be so dry when we start talking?" Now, Mrs. Settergren looked a little bit worried because, remember the tea party in which Annika came and poured sugar all over the floor and ate a whole cream cake and really caused a lot of ruckus. So Mrs. Settergren is a little nervous, but she poured a glass of juice for Pippi anyway. But she said to Pippi, "Children should be seen and not heard." You can imagine what Pippi thought about that. Pippi said, "Well, it's nice if people are happy just to look at me. I must see how it feels to be used just for a decoration." And then she sat down on the grass and stared straight ahead in front of her with a fixed smile, as if she was having her picture taken. And while Pippi was pretending to be a decoration, because that apparently is what the adults were preferring, Mrs. Settergren paid her no further attention and went on talking to Aunt Laura. And after a while she asked with concern, "Aunt Laura, how are you feeling these days?" And Aunt Laura replied, "Oh, awful, just awful. Oh, I'm so nervous and so worried about everything all of the time." Pippi jumped up excitedly. "Ha! Exactly what my grandmother used to say. She got so nervous and excited about every tiny little thing. If she was walking in the street and a brick happened to fall on her head, she would yell and make such a fuss, you would think that something terrible had happened. And once she was at a ball with my father, and they were dancing a hambo dance together. And my father, who actually is quite strong too, but I'm stronger than my father. Anyway, my father, quick as a wink, picked his mother up, who's my grandmother, and swung her around so hard that she flew straight across the ballroom and landed with a crash in the middle of the bass fiddle. And there she was, yelling and angry and telling everybody off for such a ridiculous incident. So my father picked her up and held her outside the window until she would cool off in the breeze. My grandmother wasn't happy about that either. All she did was holler even louder, "You let me go this minute, son." Well, of course, my father did bring her inside and put her carefully back down onto the ground, and you can imagine she was absolutely not pleased about any of that. And my father said he had never seen any fuss about such a thing in his whole life. Well, that's a bit rude, isn't it? Yes. Anyway, it certainly is too bad when people have trouble with their nerves. Pippi finished sympathetically and nodded her head at Aunt Laura and then dunked her cookie into her fruit juice. Oh dear, Tommy and Annika were fidgeting uneasily in their chairs because they knew that that was a tall tale from Pippi, and they were used to it, but other people were not used to Pippi's long, tall tales. And Aunt Laura shook her head in a puzzled way and said, that's a very interesting story. Well, she had a different voice. Oh, that's a very interesting story. Maybe I don't feel quite so anxious about my thoughts after all. And then Mrs. Settergren said, "Well, Aunt Laura, we do hope that you start feeling better very soon." And Pippi said, "Oh, my grandmother started feeling better very soon after that." And Aunt Laura wanted to know what had cured Pippi's grandmother. And Pippi said, "Well, drinking tea, of course. That did the trick, I can tell you. She was soon as cool as a cucumber, and she would sit peacefully for days and days and look at the weather and enjoy the bird song. And certainly, if bricks had started falling on her head one after another, she probably would have just sat there and enjoyed it. And if that could happen to my grandmother, well, it certainly could happen to anybody. And I'm sure you'll be well again soon, Aunt Laura." Tommy crept over to Aunt Laura and whispered in her ear, Aunt Laura, don't mind anything that Pippi says. She likes to tell tall tales. She doesn't even have a grandmother." Aunt Laura nodded understandingly, but Pippi had sharp ears, and she said, "Tommy's quite right. I don't have a grandmother. She doesn't exist at all. And since that's the case, why does she have to be so terribly nervous?" Aunt Laura looked at Pippi for a moment with a very puzzled expression on her face. And Pippi sat down with the same fixed smile as before. And everyone had a think about what Pippi had said. And after a few minutes, Aunt Laura said, "Do you know Wrong voice. Do you know something?" Wrong voice again. "Oh, Babushka, I'm getting confused in my voices." Aunt Laura said, "Do you know something very strange happened yesterday?" But before anyone could reply, Pippi said, "Oh, but it couldn't be nearly as strange as what I saw the day before yesterday. I was riding in a train and we were going along full speed when suddenly a cow came flying through the open window with a big suitcase hanging on her tail. She sat down in the seat across from me and began to look through the timetable to see what time we'd get to Folkeping. And I was eating a sandwich. I had packed a lot of sandwiches. I had some smoked herring sandwiches, and I thought she might be hungry. Oh, hang on, there's a... Okay. Oh, there was a little bee that was getting stuck under my bag. Fly away, bee. Happy Bee Day on Wednesday. Thank you for all the hard work you do for the planet, bee. Buzzing along. So there's Pippi in a train carriage with a pile of sandwiches and a cow who's looking at the timetable. Okay, so I thought the cow might be hungry, so I offered the cow a sandwich, said Pippi. She took a smoked herring one out of her bag and offered it to the cow. And the cow said,
"Oh, thank you very much. I simply adore smoked herring sandwiches."
And gobbled it straight up. Aunt Laura said,
"Well, that was very strange indeed."
And Pippi said, "Well, yes, you'd go a long way before you'd find another cow as strange as that one," said Pippi. "Just imagine, she took smoked herring sandwiches when I had packed cucumber, lettuce, and carrot sandwiches." Mrs. Settergren was looking far too uncomfortable with Pippi's long, tall tails and offered Aunt Laura some coffee. And she filled Aunt Laura's cup up and her own and some fruit juice for the children. And she said to Aunt Laura, "Aunt Laura, you were going to tell us about the strange thing that happened yesterday."
"Oh, yes,"
said Aunt Laura, beginning to look all worried and anxious again as she began to think about the thing that was worrying her. So Pippi jumped up and said, "Oh, speaking of strange things, you will enjoy hearing about Atagon and Theodore. Once, when my father's ship came into Singapore, we needed a new able-bodied seaman, and we took on Atagon. He was 7 feet tall and so thin his bones rattled like a rattlesnake's tail when he moved. He had pitch black hair that came down to his waist and only one snaggly tooth that grew all the way down to below his chin. My father thought that Atagon might be useful to have around to scare away any fierce wild horses into stampeding. Well," went on Pippi, really embellishing her tall tale because Aunt Laura was starting to look more relaxed and less worried about all the little thoughts that had been niggling away in her mind. So Pippi knew she was giving Aunt Laura's mind a rest by telling her a story. So she went on. "When we got to Hong Kong, we needed another sailor. And my father said, 'Pippi, we need to find another able-bodied seaman. Let's look around the harbor and see if we can find someone that would work well with Atagon.' And sure enough, that's when they found Theodore. And Theodore was almost like Atagon's twin brother." And Aunt Laura exclaimed,
"Well, that certainly was a strange coincidence."
And Tommy and Annika's mother looked very uncomfortable at this point about Pippi's tall tales and tried to change the subject by saying, excuse me, Aunt Laura, weren't you going to tell us about the strange thing that happened to you yesterday? And Aunt Laura sat and she thought, and then she said in a more relaxed way, well, actually, that will have to wait for another time. Because right now, on second thoughts, I don't think it was so strange after all. And I don't think it's anything for me to worry about. And everyone looked so surprised. They had never seen Aunt Laura look so relaxed. And she sat and she smiled at Pippi. And Pippi smiled at Aunt Laura. And they both exchanged a little wink. For apparently, they both enjoyed tall tales. So then she said goodbye to Tommy and Annika. And then she came over to Pippi and she said, goodbye, my new friend. Wrong voice again. Goodbye, my new little friend. You're quite right. I'm beginning to feel better already. I don't feel nervous at all anymore. And Pippi said, oh, I'm so glad, Aunt Laura. Keep finding stories to tell yourself when you feel nervous. And then you'll be able to tackle your challenges much more mightily. And you know, Aunt Laura, my father was very pleased about getting Theodore in Hong Kong to help on our ship because he said he could stampede twice as many wild horses. And that's the end of that chapter. Well, thank you for joining Babushka and I for surprise storytelling on my friend's surprise terrace. And hello to my surprise friend who doesn't know that we're reading here today. Thank you for your beautiful garden. And we'll see you all another day. Enjoy making up stories. Bye. Hugs, hugs, hugs. Hugs, hugs, hugs.